Hi everyone, my name is Vincent Teo and I'm a professional reviewer and calibrator. In this channel we do scientific TV reviews, video interviews, setting tips and tricks, and also the odd unboxing video. So if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing by clicking the button below. Thank you. The Panasonic EZ1002 or the EZ1000 is the flagship television from Panasonic this year. It is an OLED television which uses a WRGB OLED panel from LG Display. It is a flat screen design coming in 65 inches and later on in the year 77-inch versions. Let's start by talking about the design of this television. What is most striking about the aesthetics of the EZ1002 or EZ1000 is that it comes with an integrated soundbar at the bottom of the screen, which is separate from the screen, so you can actually dismantle it for wall mounting. So if you wish to wall mount this television, you can remove the soundbar altogether. But obviously you'll be paying extra for this soundbar if you're not going to use it. Now the soundbar itself spans the entire length of the screen, but the weight is actually concentrated in the central pedestal arch. So if you, let's say, have an AV rack that is slightly narrower, you can actually afford to let the soundbar hang beyond the edges slightly, although how it will harmonize with your existing decor is another matter altogether. In terms of the sound output, in terms of the sound quality of the soundbar, Panasonic calls it a dynamic blade speaker system. It has actually been tuned by Technics, which is a very famous audio brand under Panasonic's parent company. In terms of the sound quality of this dynamic blade speaker system, I think it is very, very impressive, especially when you consider the clarity and especially treble detailing that Technics engineer has actually developed for this soundbar. The bass response, initially I thought that it could be better, but once I cranked up the volume, I don't know whether you remember, I did an audio shootout of the sound quality between this TV, the Lever Build 7 and also the Sony A1. When I cranked up the sound to match the volume of all the other sets, the bass response is actually sufficient. Obviously it can't match an external dedicated soundbar with external subwoofer or a home theater system, but in itself I think it is more than sufficient for day-to-day viewing. Let's go back to the design of this Panasonic EZ1002 or EZ1000. Now, OLED TVs can be made very, very thin because they don't require a backlight, unlike LED LCDs. Panasonic has adopted a two-thickness approach that manufacturers use these days, in that the top half of the chassis is very, very thin, consisting of the OLED panel only, but the bottom half of the chassis have to be expanded to accommodate the internal processing and also the power circuitry and the connection inputs. The OLED panel is framed by a black bezel and there's a gleaming chrome detailing along all the edges with rounded corners as well, which I think looks very, very classy. In terms of the connection inputs, they are all found on the left side of the display. I always get confused which part is the left side and which part is the right side, but according to the nomenclature of TV manufacturers, the far end of where I'm standing is actually the left side, and I think this end is the right side, so I hope I got it right. So the connection ports are found at the rear on the left side of the display. There are 4 HDMI inputs, but going through the user menu and also the manual, we found out that only HDMI 1 and 2 are the full bandwidth ports. So let's say if you are going to watch Billy Lim Halftime Walk, which has been filmed at 60 Hz at 4K, if you wish to watch that at, say, higher bit depth at 10 bit or higher chroma depth, you'll have to connect it to HDMI 1 or HDMI 2. Also, if you own a SkyQ system, if you connect it to HDMI 3 or HDMI 4, then you won't be getting a 10 bit to 160p signal when the SkyQ box does the auto detection. You need to connect it to either HDMI 1 or HDMI 2 to get the 10-bit to 160p synchronization between the SkyQ Silver box and also the Panasonic EZ1002. A plastic cover is applied to better hide the connections and provide a cleaner look from the back. Before I move on to talk about picture quality, I would like to thank Crampton & Moore Doncaster for sponsoring this video. If you don't know this, Crampton & Moore is a retailer that specializes in consumer electronics, and I've been working with the store for some years now in terms of obtaining review samples. They've been kind enough to send me some TVs that manufacturers for some reason or another refuse to send to me or are reluctant to send to me, so I'm very grateful for their support in that sense. So if you are considering buying any television, even if it's not this Panasonic EZ1002, if you are thinking about buying any TV at all, I would like to ask you to consider giving Richard at Crampton & Moore Doncaster a call on 01302 365 760. Just call them, ask for Richard, say that Vincent from HDTV Test sent you, and he'll hopefully help you out with a competitive price and great service. Without their help, I won't be able to review some TVs that manufacturers refuse to send to me, and so I would like to ask you to support this channel by supporting them as well. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the picture quality of this Panasonic EZ1002. And I think that the main strength, the strength of this TV, this OLED television, compared with all other televisions, regardless of whether it's OLED televisions or LED LCD televisions on the market, is undoubtedly its color accuracy. So Panasonic has enlisted the help of post-production company, famous colorists from this company called Deluxe, to try and tune the colors of this TV, and it certainly shows in the out-of-the-box accuracy, but it can be improved to an even higher level through the onboard controls that has been provided in the user menu. Within the user menu, you can find 2-point and 10-point white balance controls, 10-point gamma controls, and an advanced color management system, or CMS, that allows us to adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance of the 3 primary colors of red, green, and blue, and the 3 secondary colors of cyan, magenta, and yellow. Very, very comprehensive. Panasonic claims that it already uses an internal 3D LUT or lookup table to fine-tune the colors, but we found that with the provision of these calibration controls, especially in the hands of a skilled and experienced calibrator, you can really take this color to a really accurate level that cannot be matched by any other TV on the market, regardless of whether they have Dolby Vision or not. I forgot to probably mention this, but this TV, let's get this out of the way, doesn't have Dolby Vision support. So Dolby Vision is a proprietary dynamic metadata system that has been developed by Dolby. What it does is that it provides frame by frame. Theoretically, it provides frame by frame or scene by scene optimization when tone mapping, let's say 1000 nits or 4000 nits content to a display of lower peak brightness. In terms of Sdr color accuracy, standard dynamic range color accuracy, I don't think this TV can be beaten at all, especially after calibration. So once this TV has been calibrated, you can rest assured that you'll be watching content and films and all sorts of programs with the fidelity and accuracy that is actually intended by the directors and the producers. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing, which is a big deal on OLED, which is the near black handling. In the past, OLED TVs have suffered from less than optimal gradation in the area just above black. This is because OLED can deliver true blacks, that's without a doubt, but there's always been a challenge to try and render very dark gray just above black because of the big gap, so to speak, between the off state of OLED and the on state when current has to pass through. So there's a big gap between the 0 CDM square blacks and the very dark grays that that are found in the content itself. So in terms of the above black detailing, above black handling, the Panasonic EZ1002 is as good as the 2017 OLEDs that I've actually reviewed, which is the LG C7, B7, E7 and W7, and also the Sony A1 OLED as well. So all the 2017 sets have superior above black handling compared with 2016 sets and 2015 sets. If you remember, when the 2015 LG OLEDs came out, there was always going to be lots of complaints when there's a poorly compressed episode of Games of Thrones in terms of just random fizziness, just really crawling noise in the darker scenes because of the compression that is used. This has improved on the 2016 LG OLEDs, but certainly in terms of the cleanliness and the stability of near black regions, the Panasonic EZ1002 alongside other 2017 OLEDs have taken it to the next level. I would say that it is not an issue at all. We watched various scenes from Skyfall, in a very dark chapter in Skyfall where Javier Bardem is climbing up the hill, approaching the chapel. We watched that on Blu-ray. It's a pristine source, but there's usually still some noise, and it's certainly cleaner than the 2016 sets. And we watched some low bitrate content from Sky TV, from BBC, from ITV as well, and Panasonic handled it extremely well. This is on par with the LG and the Sony OLED for the Sony 2017 OLED, except that the Sony OLED can usually take it even better with their smooth gradation feature enabled. But I'm very happy with the performance of the EZ1002 in this regard, in the above black handling. Now, when we talk about above black handling, we need to move on next to talk about near black uniformity. When you look at OLED, when you watch OLED in a pitch black room, the very dark scenes can present itself with thin vertical streak of lines, or in the past, vignetting where the edges, the sides of the screen are darker than the center. Now we scrutinize this EZ1002 or EZ1000 in a dark room, in a pitch black room. We put up a full field gray slides ranging from 1% above black to 4% above black. And what the Panasonic EZ1000 exhibited was reverse vignetting. Reverse vignetting means that the sides are actually slightly brighter because of overcompensation to try and combat vignetting. So it exhibited some reverse vignetting, and there's also the telltale sign of vertical streaks, so dark vertical streaks on these very dark full field gray rasters. These near black uniformity issues are unavoidable for the current state of WRGB OLED, and in light of its other strengths, OLED's other strengths of true blacks, rich colors, wide viewing angles, granted by the technology's self-illuminating characteristics, on balance, I think that is a more than worthwhile trade-off to have these dark bands. The sensitivity depends from individual to individual, but it's not as if LED LCDs are free of uniformity issues either. They can suffer from clouding, flash lighting, dirty screen effect, and I think the thin vertical streaks or banding, as you want to call it, and the reverse, certainly the reverse vignetting is not an issue at all. In real life content, we barely even saw it. Well, I would say that it's not a problem at all, the reverse vignetting. The thin vertical streaks, it can present itself in very dark scenes, especially when there's a panning shot across, say, a smoky fog and stuff. But for me, it doesn't actually bother me at all, because I know that all OLEDs suffer from this in one form or another. It's just an inherent trait of the display technology, but in exchange you get this amazing blacks, these supremely rich colors that just pop, and also this very wide viewing angles and other motion characteristics as well. Right, so with that out of the way, let's move on to video processing. Panasonic has always has one of the best video processing in the market. I always respected them because this Japanese brand has a division within their company that deals with content creation and post-production. This is called Panasonic Hollywood Lab. So I think in terms of adhering to video accuracy and color fidelity, they get their expertise and heritage and tradition from Panasonic Hollywood Labs. And it certainly shows on their consumer televisions, especially their high-end consumer televisions. The processing is very, very clean. There's no underhanded, undefeatable noise reduction or edge enhancement at all. And if we put up an SMPTE RP133 test pattern, which is in 576i resolution or PAL, the Panasonic presented it very, very sharply, very, very detailed without excessive noisiness or overshoot or ringing. So I'm very, very happy with the upscaling and also the generic video processing of this television. Okay, the next topic that I want to cover is motion. All OLED TVs currently are sample and hold displays. If you put up a motion resolution test pattern such as the one that you've been using over the years on the Panasonic EZ1002, the baseline motion resolution, by baseline I mean without any motion enhancement technology switched on, the baseline motion resolution is 300 lines, which is typical for a sample and hold display according to this test pattern. Now there are two ways to increase the motion resolution on this TV. The first method is by interpolation, and you can switch on interpolation by engaging intelligent frame creation to either minimum, mid or max, and also there's a custom option that allows you to adjust the blur reduction and the film smooth function. This is similar to the de-judder and de-blur function on the LG OLEDs or the Samsung televisions. So there's a custom intelligent frame creation submenu that allows you to adjust these components separately. Now that is interpolation. Invariably with interpolation there is always going to be some side effects, because what interpolation means is that you are artificially injecting frames in between the original frames, and there will invariably be soap opera effect to 24 frames per second movies, or interpolation artifacts like tearing or shimmering around moving objects, or let's say haloing when the ball is flying past the crowd, or the triple ball effect where you actually see 3 balls. So those are some famous interpolation artifacts that is caused by the algorithm not being able to interpret complex enough background to artificially inject the frames correctly without introducing side effects. So that is interpolation. That is the first method to increase the motion resolution. The second method is BFI, or black frame insertion, where black frames are inserted in between the original frames to clear our retinal persistence. So there is a BFI mode on this Panasonic EZ1002 or EZ1000. You can engage it by switching clear motion to on. But with BFI, due to how it works, there's inevitably going to be a drop in light output. And also another problem is flicker, which may put some people off. Now, sensitivity to flicker vary from individual to individual, but the BFI on this Panasonic EZ1000 or EZ1002 OLED TV is very, very well implemented. So if you send it a 60 Hz signal, there's some slight flicker if I stare at it on a full wide screen, but it's very, very minimal, and I can happily watch it with BFI on photorealistic content or when playing games. Now the Sony A1 OLED also provides a BFI mode, but the advantage of the Panasonic EZ1000 is that if you remember the Sony OLED, when I did my video and when I did my testing, I don't know whether I actually wrote it in my written review, but the Sony A1 OLED deals with 60 Hz signal quite well in terms of the flickering when you turn on BFI or black frame insertion, but it flickered a lot with 24 Hz signal. The Panasonic did better with the 24 Hz. The flicker is quite minimal as well, so I would happily engage it for 24 frames per second movie, but normally I don't anyway, because 24 frames per second movies are inherently meant to be slightly blurry to give the surreal, dreamy, filmic look. But if you wish to engage BFI or black frame insertion for 24 Hz content, the Panasonic EZ1000 will present less flicker than the Sony A1 OLED. Okay, the other side effect I mentioned about black frame insertion is a drop in light output. Now, I don't think it is a big issue on this Panasonic EZ1002. On a 10% window, even with BFI switched on, I could easily extract around 200 nits from a 10% window. On a full field wide, it drops to around 63 nits because of ABL or automatic brightness limiter. But I still think that the light output is sufficient for all but the brightest rooms if you decide to turn BFI on the Panasonic OLED. Before I start talking about HDR, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the OLED compensation cycle and the general measures to reduce screen burn and image retention on this Panasonic EZ1002 OLED. There have been suggestions from other publications that the screen doesn't dim down on a static image, but that's clearly not true. As you can see from this time-lapse video we did against another screen who can hold its brightness statically without dropping. Now, there's nothing wrong with dimming down on a static image at all, because this is a measure that many manufacturers use to try and combat image retention, to try and prevent image retention and screen burn on these OLED, these self-emissive display technologies. In terms of other measures on this TV, all OLED TVs have to run a compensation cycle. What compensation cycle means is that upon shutdown, the screen will adjust its voltages itself to clear any image retention and also improve the uniformity. You can actually find out the number of times your TV has actually, your Panasonic EZ1002 has actually performed this compensation cycle by going into the user menu. So if we actually go to Help and go to System Information, now there are various numbers here, but from our testing, it took me an insane amount of time, many photos, many checking of the wattage meter. So it took me an insane amount of time, but I'll just explain a few numbers here and let you know what it means. And you probably won't get this from any other reviewer or calibrator, or even engineers. The status for here is the number of hours that has been on. So this screen that I have for review here has been used for around 181 hours. 66 is the number of times that it has actually been switched on. And status 8 actually shows us the number of compensation cycle that this TV has undergone. So these are hexadecimal code. Now the first number here is the number of compensation cycle that this TV has started. This TV, after it accumulated 4 hours of usage time, it will start automatically trigger a compensation cycle upon standby. And how do we know this? We know this by looking at our wattage meter. So it will, once you go into standby, it will still use power around 45 watts of power. And we took lots of screenshots, an insane amount of screenshots to find this out. And no one actually told us this, and I'm just giving you the secret away. The first number here is the compensation cycle that has been started, and the second number is the number of compensation cycle that has been successfully completed. So the reason this is because sometimes you are not aware that the TV has actually gone into a compensation cycle and you start watching TV again, so it will be terminated. So this number will increase, but this number won't. And again, I stress that I found this out the hard way, the trial and error way. So I just basically took lots of photos every hour or so, checking switch on and off and things like that. So you won't believe the amount of effort I went into this to find this information out. But here you go, you found it out within 1 second. So that was the compensation cycle, and the screen also dims down over time, unlike what another publication has stated. In terms of HDR or high dynamic range, the Panasonic EZ1000 or EZ1002 supports HLG, which is hybrid log gamma, the broadcast HDR standard, HDR10, the open standard used in 4K Blu-rays and also online 4K streaming from Netflix or Amazon Prime Video. But it doesn't support Dolby Vision, which is the proprietary dynamic metadata technology developed and introduced by Dolby. Let's start with HLG. This TV supports HLG out of the box. It successfully played a HLG encoded clip called Travel XP, and you can clearly see that at the bottom right corner there's a HDR HLG notification if you press the info button. And for HDR10, we watched a bunch of our favorite or reference Ultra HD Blu-rays, 4K Blu-rays if you want to call them as such. So we started off with The Martian, the opening scene of The Martian. There's a panning shot across Mars, and the Panasonic EZ1000 presented it smoothly without any excessive judder. And I think the disc itself inherently has some posterization anyway, so the Panasonic can't avoid some posterization in the sky, but the Sony A1 can actually smooth out this posterization, especially if you engage smooth gradation. But the Panasonic did very well here. It certainly exhibited less posterization than, let's say, the LG OLED or the Samsung 2017 QLEDs or the 2016 HDTVs. So in terms of the cleanliness in this scene, I would say that the Sony A1 is first, then the Panasonic EZ1002 is a very close second. Then comes the LG OLED, then comes the Samsungs. We really like the tone mapping approach of the Panasonic EZ1002. In fact, in my opinion, it may be the best that I've actually seen on a consumer OLED television. Now, if you haven't actually watched my previous HDR tone mapping video, I'll explain it very briefly. When you try and tone map content that is mastered to 1000 nits or 4000 nits, as found on most 4K Blu-rays. So 4K Blu-rays are mastered to are graded at either 1000 nits or 4000 nits. When you try to tone map this to a display that's only capable of 665 nits, as this is the peak brightness that I've measured specifically on my review sample. When you try to tone map 1000 nits or 4000 nits to 665 nits, then you have to decide whether you want to actually preserve highlight detail or you want to preserve the overall brightness of the HDR image. And I think the Panasonic EZ1000 strikes the best balance in terms of preserving enough detail while maintaining the brightness. On the Sony A1, I've demonstrated that it is actually discarding or clipping some detail between 1000 nits and 4000 nits when you watch a 4K Blu-ray that has been mastered at 4000 nits. But on the Panasonic EZ1002, the detail are mostly still present, but the average picture level is still quite high, it's still bright enough. Hopefully you can see from these clips of 4K Blu-rays that have been mastered to 4000 nits. The first is Pan. Notice how the sun retains some sort of definition without blowing out. And also Batman vs Superman. Check out the white shirt on Batfleck with the lightning bolts in the background. They still retain their brightness and detail. So I really like the tone mapping approach of the Panasonic EZ1002. On balance, in my personal opinion, it's the best tone mapping approach for HDR10 that I've seen on any consumer television so far. And the remarkable thing is that this sort of approach, in the past I used to think that it introduces some posterization, because this is the same approach that is used by Samsung and also Lever on their Build 7 OLED. So on the Samsung SUHD and QLED television, they try to maintain as much detail. In fact, I think they're maintaining the full detail up to 4000 nits, and that's the same applies to the Lever Build 7 as well. But in doing so, they invariably introduce some posterization in what should be smooth gradients. But on the Panasonic EZ1002, I think it is discarding some very tiny detail at the very high end near to 4000 nits. But in terms of the smoothness and the suppression of posterization, I think it does an outstanding job when it comes to HDR10 tone mapping. Obviously, the arrival of Dolby Vision will maybe change the landscape somewhat. There have been some suggestions that the Panasonic EZ1000 or EZ1002 is so accurate out of the box that it doesn't need any calibration, but we found that not to be true, particularly for HDR10 content. When we watch the storm scene from Mad Max Fury Road, a 4K Blu-ray that has been mastered to 4000 nits, and I'm going to pause it here where the fire is exploding. Before any sort of calibration with the stock settings, the TV is actually clipping some of the color detail, especially in terms of red. So you can see that the fire here becomes very flat. But after calibration, especially with optimization of certain settings, then you can see that it actually restores the lost color with the out-of-the-box settings. So certainly this is a TV that can benefit from calibration in HDR terms. So if I toggle back and forth between the before calibration and after calibration settings, you can see that before calibration with the out-of-the-box numbers and settings, the fire looks very flat. But after calibration, you inject more detail and richness to these exploding fires. More and more companies are increasingly recognizing the need for low latency gaming, and certainly Panasonic is no different. I would like to congratulate them for bringing their input lag down to 26 milliseconds in both 1080p SDR and also 4K HDR modes. Now, if you want 444 chroma out of it, you have to engage the 1080p Pure Direct or 4K Pure Direct control, and that increases input lag slightly to 36 milliseconds, which is still very reasonable. Another good thing about this Panasonic EZ1002 is that the blackframe insertion mode can be engaged in game mode as well, and it will only increase the input lag by half a frame to 34 milliseconds, which is still fantastic. So you get this really clear motion when panning in games, and I think the drop in light output, as I mentioned earlier, is not that much. It's still very usable, and because most games are rendered in 60 Hz, then the flicker hopefully won't be too troubling for your eyes. So in summary, I think the Panasonic EZ1002 is a fabulous OLED TV, but then again, most of the 2017 sets are excellent TVs as well. So I think the strengths of the Panasonic EZ1002 or EZ1000 are its unrivaled color accuracy, especially after calibration. It presents colors in a truer way, more faithful manner than the LG or the Sony OLEDs. The Sony OLED, the 10-point white balance control, they don't really interpolate correctly, so you can adjust 10% and 20% video interval, get it right, but 15% may be off. And the Sony OLED also doesn't have any advanced color measuring system. Sony doesn't believe in offering CMS on their consumer televisions, whereas the LG, they have 21-point white balance controls, but their CMS has always been prone to introducing posterization and noise artifacts if you adjust them too much. Another great thing about the calibration of the EZ1000 is that in conjunction with portrait displays and SpectraCal's Kalman software, you can use DDC or direct display control to make the adjustment directly from your laptop without actually summoning any user menu whatsoever. So unrivaled color accuracy is the first strength. And then I really like the Hdr Tone Mapping approach that is used by Panasonic engineers as well. I think they've done a fabulous job that strikes the best balance in retaining enough brightness and detail, especially in 4K Blu-rays that has been mastered to 4000 nits, all without actually introducing any excessive posterization. And the third thing is the motion. By offering a BFI mode, this already elevates the Panasonic OLED above the LG OLEDs, which don't have any BFI or black frame insertion. So the main competition is with Sony, which has a BFI mode, and Panasonic has a slight upper hand that sending a 24 Hz signal to the TV doesn't introduce as much flicker as the Sony OLED when you engage BFI. Also, if you decide to use interpolation to reduce motion blur and enhance motion clarity, the Panasonic has a custom intelligent film creation mode that allows you to separately adjust the deblur and dejudder component to increase motion clarity without introducing soap opera effect. Whereas on the Sony A1, even the lowest motion flow settings will invariably introduce some soap opera effect. Even with, let's say, if you decide to go into motion flow custom on the Sony A1 to adjust the smoothness control above minimum, which is off. So smoothness minimum is off on the Sony A1. If you increase it to 1 to activate the interpolation to reduce motion blur, it will still introduce some very slight soap opera effect. Whereas the Panasonic, you can use the intelligent film creation custom to adjust blur reduction without adjusting film smooth, and you won't get any soap opera effect while increasing the motion resolution. The big downsides of this TV, first is obviously the price. The price is £7,000 when I filmed this video, which is in June 2017, and it is significantly more expensive than most other TVs on the market. Panasonic are going to bring out a step-down model which is substantially cheaper, the EZ952 or EZ950, and I'll be interested to see how close the performance of that is compared with this set. So the price may be off-putting for many people. £7,000 is £2,000 more expensive than the 65-inch Sony A1 OLED or the LG 65-inch E7. Also, another thing that will probably put some people off is the lack of Dolby Vision support. Now, because I haven't actually done any in-depth testing of Dolby Vision, so I don't know how much of the theoretical advantage of Dolby Vision can translate to real-world benefits. I am going to be very interested to see what Dolby Vision can bring to the party in terms of tone mapping. But in terms of HDR tone mapping, I think the Panasonic OLED is excellent. Of course, I can say whatever I want to say about Dolby Vision, but for many buyers, I think what they will be wanting, I think it's becoming a tick box or check box exercise. And Dolby Vision, if you're actually wanting to future-proof, who knows whether Dolby Vision will become prevalent or not. But if you want to future-proof your TV, many people will be looking for Dolby Vision. It's like a tick box exercise, and they will be looking for Dolby Vision compatibility for future-proofing. But having said that, we still don't know what are the actual benefits of Dolby Vision on an OLED, and until I can compare HDR10 on this TV against Dolby Vision on another Dolby Vision capable TV side by side to see whether there are any tangible benefits, I certainly cannot make any definitive judgment at this moment in time. I hope you found this video review useful. If you think so, please click the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you the next time.